Hi, I'm John Mouse. I've been cooking hog fry since I guess I was about 9 years old. We would go down and butcher a hog and scrape it and gut it, and we would quarter it up, and then we'd get together and cut it up to little chunks where we was able to fry it. I'm going to demonstrate a little bit how we cut this stuff up. You got to debone your meat. Helps if you have a good sharp knife. Know where your bones are at. I've been cutting up pork since I was a kid. At church, Dad used to tell me, son, he said, you can debone more meat than 5 guys can cut up. And I always took that to heart and made it where I would try to keep everybody busy. Then when I got through cutting it off the bone, then I would help them process it and get it ready for the pot. This usually took 2 or 3 days before we had a hog fry. If we was having one, we would get together early one morning to butcher a hog, and we'd debone. Then I'd get my knives out and start cutting them into strips. I liked cooking hog because when I was a kid, I would sneak around and I'd listen to the old men as they cooked, and that's where I basically learned how to cook hog fry, was just by sneaking around and listening. And the old men loved to tell stories, all kinds of stories. Dad was good about telling stories about dogs he had, and I would always get a good chuckle out of some of the stories that he had to tell as he was cooking meat. Today I cook the way that I know that's best, that my dad had taught me, and my grandpa and my uncles and all who cooked before me. We cook for a lot of different occasions here at the tribe. We cook for inaugurations, and I've been asked to cook many different places, and that always comes out real good. If you'll notice, I got an extra chair over here. My dad always came with me whenever I cooked hog fry somewhere, and he always sat in the chair next to me and watched me as I cooked. As I cooked, he would sit and watch the pot and watch me cook, and by the time the meat got ready to come off, I'd always pick out a sample and let him try, and he'd always say either it's good or I need to add a little bit more salt. But as time went on, as I kept getting older and a little bit better at cooking hog fries, he just sat there and was ready for his sample. So that's basically the pork shoulder that I just cut up that we'll be cooking for you today. Yeah, today we're going to be cooking with lard. A long time ago, they used to take the fat off the pork and they'd render it down to make the lard, and that's what we'll be cooking with today. A lot of people like to use water and a little bit of lard, but this is the way I was shown when I was a kid, and this has always stuck with me, to how to cook real hog fries with lard. Now we're going to test this grease and make sure it's hot enough to start cooking, which it is. It's starting to boil now, so we can add our chunk meat in.
Let's go.
We're cooking about 25 pounds of meat today. Usually we cook quite a bit more than that during the holidays, as I normally cook about 200 pounds. When you put your meat in there, after it starts cooking, it turns into a white color, because all that meat consists of a lot of water, and that water is getting boiled out. Your lard will turn white. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to cook this meat at low heat, and we'll cook it long enough, but you don't want to stir it too long, but if you stir it too long, then it'll start falling apart. It'll start coming like pulled pork. Make sure all your meat gets pushed down in the grease so that it all cooks about the same. And it'll take a little while before it really gets to cooking good. And I did bring a couple old sticks over here I got leaned against the tree. I'm dating them back 40, 50 years, both of them. You know, my dad had made them a long time ago, and that's what I was, you know, first brought up cooking with, was those. And you'd stick them down there, and you'd make sure your hog meat didn't stick to the bottom of your pot. And a lot of people ask what kind of season I use, and I just use salt. And salt's the only thing, and you know, these pots are old. I know this one that I got here, it's probably over 50, 75 years old. And then I've got one at the house that's older than that, so probably over 100 years old. This has been seasoned so good that, you know, every time I cook meat in it, it seems like it gets better and better. And the grease is starting to clear up around the edges, which means it's about time to start adding our seasoning to our meat. And once you add your seasoning in there, it's a time you really got to watch your meat so it doesn't stick to your pot. So I'm going to add my seasoning right now. I'm just using regular salt, and I take two good heapings of salt and pour over the meat. And seems like every 25 pounds, I'll add at least 2 or 2.5 of salt to it to get the right seasoning. Then once you get your salt in there, is the time Dad always said it's time to work. So, because that salt will cause that pork to stick to the bottom of your pot. So you got to keep it worked up so it doesn't stick. And you just continue to let it cook down, and then in a little bit it'll start turning darker brown. As long as then that salt is making the meat turn brown, and then that's when we get it to the crispiness that we want, or the tenderness that we want for the hog to be. I really enjoy it. And I love just talking to people when they come by. They like to ask questions on where'd you get your pot, you know, what kind of meat are you cooking? Is it a special kind of meat? And I just tell them, no, it's just regular hog. You just cut it in chunks and throw it in there. Ooh, look at that meat. You gotta taste it. Well, I bet you guys wish you was here. Man, that meat was just right. My dad would have been proud. He'd have said that was just the right amount of seasoning on that pork.